I'm a man who believed that I died 20 years ago, and I live like a man who is dead already. I have no fear whatsoever of anybody or anything.
Gary Webb. I am an investigative journalist, and in 1996 I wrote a series of stories entitled Dark Alliance, which was about CIA involvement in drug trafficking.
I knew a man who once said death smiles at us all. All a man can do is smile back.
We've both been skull and bone, the secret society.
It's so secret we can't talk about it.
What does that mean for America? The conspiracy theorists are going to go
I'm
wild.
sure they are. I don't know. I haven't seen the red
Number 322.
I sad duty to report this afternoon that my friend and colleague, Tim Russert, collapsed and died early this afternoon.
I may die in this cell tonight or in the arena tomorrow. I am a slave. What possible difference can I make?
And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Hello, welcome back to your favorite live call-in weekly parapolitical conspiracy show. All the adjectives, throw them all at us. They apply. Ready to hang out again with you already dead heads. We have plenty of schizophrenia to parse through with as always, our friend Austin and Jose Galison as well, myself. Jumping into it. Usually this is our first time encountering each other for a week, every week, but today was a little bit different. Me and you just recorded another Waco episode yesterday, part 3. We actually have 2 behind the paywall right now. We just haven't gone around to releasing 2 or 3. We, for those who may recall, recently we had a pretty epic Already Dead where you went on a crazy Waco tangent, kind of creating your own just off-the-cuff episode. And from there we were like, hey, let's do a Waco episode, and that even wasn't able to be contained to 1 episode. It became 2, and we recorded the second one last night, and even still its tendrils are extending further and further still, and it has brought us to today. Luckily we sort of have a bit of, I guess you'd say, I mean, obviously there's like a million things going on at any given time in this wild world, but kind of a slow news week and whatever. What is this show for other than going following weird niche parapolitical rabbit holes, but certain something through our travels in the weird Waco world came up, and that was Operation Open Eyes and Project Clear Eyes, I believe. I think we kind of got into weird MK Ultra territory in our Waco coverage, getting into the theories that perhaps these were actually sleeper agents, that were failed to go off, and then there was a wet works team that got sent in to clean it all up, and so obviously it's crazy MK Ultra CIA intrigue, and so we kind of followed that thread and tugged at it, and we're still tugging at it still, and we have enveloped Austin in schizophrenia. He's also trying to quit tobacco at the same time, so I think he's kind of stacking it up. I think he's coping with the lack of nicotine by diving deeper into his obsession, which ironically is just going to create a nasty spiral. But a pleasure to have you with me, Austin. But yeah, we could jump into that. I'm ready to follow you wherever you may bring me, my friend. And also a reminder, we will have the phone lines open soon. You can call in so we can give Austin's brain a break occasionally. We can field your calls. And then the second half of the show, we will go into the patrons. We'll hang out with the patrons, although we usually keep the phone lines open during that time. But yeah, I think we're going to be really digging deep into some weird, wild MK Ultra wackiness. Who knows? May even get even weirder. I think you're maybe making a little bit of an effort, I think, in your content. I'm getting the feeling, we've talked about this on the phone, that perhaps maybe for at least a period of time, maybe a little bit different focus of sorts than the dark shit you're always focused on.
Right.
Fair enough. So we may, with that, you may see a little bit of that in today's show. Maybe getting a little bit more in the weird, the occult, some of the more niche, a little bit less child trafficking networks.
Right.
Although that's kind of hard to avoid in today's discourse, at least parapolitical discourse. That seems to be what it's all swirling around.
Absolutely, man. And I honestly, I'm going through, it feels like I described it to somebody, a couple of days ago, or maybe even yesterday. They asked me why I was, why are you still living in LA? Like, what's keeping you there? And I said, I'm addicted to fear and loathing in modern Babylon. Is essentially what I basically said. But in reality, it's far more, obviously that's not the actual answer to the question. I think there's, which wasn't the point of me even bringing that up, but it's mainly just to kind of reflect on the overall sentiment of the sort of perspective that I am, and kind of like this overall philosophical impression that I'm trying to follow through in some, applicable way that's I personally, just even knowing what, where fear and loathing came from, right? Obviously, for me personally, it's fear and loathing in Las Vegas and the Hunter S. Thompson connection. But what it truly was essentially this cultural critique of this, basically this perceived moral degeneracy is how it's described, and hypocritical hedonism of American society. And I just thought, understanding that it's fear and loathing essentially means that it's inherent distrust, right? Particularly, just in regard to conflict between the general public and the permanent establishment. And I just also, it was never really about, at least as a young person, it definitely, the priority was the psychological state of paranoia and dread that you experience during a drug-fueled excess. But at this point, it's kind of evolved into, obviously, addressing this false sense of revolution in the air that truly is only facilitating a dystopian agenda. Like, it's not genuine, and at least the vast majority of what I see, kind of the, I don't know, just it's just strange because it feels as if there's some type of, you know, legitimate, at the very least, an attempt to undermine any sort of genuine grassroots movement, any type, and especially to almost derail the natural process of revolting against, right, so sort of the permanent establishment and the structure of the current system and the power paradigm in a way. And so I just thought, personally, I don't know, I've been kind of reflecting on exactly the ideology, which, I am kind of under the impression is being exploited. The real strategic nature of attempting to exploit the youth in terms of just generations of American children who are effectively going through this natural process of attempting to revolt against, this accepted cultural norm in a certain sense, right, which is only natural, but in a way that gets hijacked, right, and basically it gets redirected into only facilitating, as I said before, that dystopian nature of the overall international framework of the globalist agenda. And so, anyway, that's a long-winded way to essentially just proclaim the fact that, I definitely feel as if all of these various lines of revolution that you can point to, let's just say these massive protests or, especially riots whenever they do inherently and ultimately go violent. I mean, Albania is a great example, but I wasn't even intending on getting into that because I did do some interesting research into, obviously, the US government's role in kind of staging this massive civil unrest in Albania itself. And I feel as if they have a prominent role to play, and in terms of just the U.S. establishment, kind of having this just. I guess you could put it in a way, the proverbial octopus and the tentacles reaching out into this globalist, agenda at large. And big protest in Belfast that people are obviously focusing on. And I just think beyond that, we talked about what Howard Nowak, I believe, was the name of the individual who last week is basically
race war of last week. We got the race war of this week, which exactly. I mean, every one of them I just kind of have been not really interested in. I don't know. I mean, it seems a lot of people are. I don't know where you're at on that, if you're even trying to delve into that. By the way, I've made a note of Albania. Maybe we'll delve into that later if we have time. I do not feel like we'll have a time with this, but I know you want to get into
Probably
today.
not. But no, what I did find that was absolutely just, it's kind of stunning. It's just another extraordinary avenue of reinforcing this level of detail that I almost never really expect to find, right? And whenever I do find what seems to be somewhat of a credible window into, this level of detail of what and that was what we're alluding to, just so people see in the chat. Carmelo Anthony was convicted today.
Yeah, it was kind of obvious. Although I guess it is new. Maybe we should have said that explicitly. Maybe we're a little bit in our news bubble, because it was, I think, in the last past like 6 hours that they announced it. So like, I mean, I knew like almost immediately, but I guess my head's way too into this stuff. So yes, Carmelo Anthony was just convicted. Now, I haven't followed the case very closely. It's kind of seemed like distraction. It kind of seems like, I don't know, at the very least, awful people on both sides. I don't really have a strong opinion on the legality or what the fuck or whatever. I don't know the circumstances. It just kind of comes off at a glance as dumb race war bullshit.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I've just kind of had little interest in it.
And, just considering the subject that we covered last week, just with Henry Nowak, I believe was his name, and of course it's a stabbing, which is eerily similar to this, and allegedly racially motivated, which obviously we found out and discovered it was not, with this recent police body cam footage that just happened to go viral and be released just at this around the same time, where obviously directly after this the Carmelo Anthony verdict would be made, right? And so I just find it strange, because again, this is a stabbing, racially motivated, allegedly, right? At least characterized in this way, and given the false framework to, at least I think, intentionally ratchet up and escalate this sort of framework of racial tension, right? And just understanding how to consistently exploit that culture war at large and the cultural divide, and stoke those tension. And I think I even saw Sam basically tweet, "Cue the race riots," right? They want martial law and will not stop until they get it, he said. And just seeing the strange similarities between the two cases, and seeing the difference in terms of, this is obviously going to have much more of an impact on the progressive mentality, I guess, in a way, who are now championing the fact that, because all you have to do is point out the fact it was an all-white jury, or whatever the hell that they're going to focus on. And by the way, I'm imagining that was engineered for the very purpose to consistently escalate this very cultural divide in this certain framework of racial tension.
By the way, real quick, Fire Pixie did point, it almost got it right. A lot of people aren't realizing, but this is kind of like the equivalent of, like, how like when a groundhog comes out and it's like the whole shadow thing, and that determines whether however many weeks or whatever of spring or whatever the fuck. Well, we had that with the Carmelo Anthony guilty. It's the essentially it's the official, like, nature saying white boy summer has commenced. So,
well, what about Chud, man? That's so funny.
Yeah, they're currently trying to get him his Bible or some such stupid fucking. Which, like, to be clear, I don't think you should be deprived of your Bible in jail, I guess, but it just kind of seems like low hanging, some sort of, I don't know, maybe contrived. I feel like there might be more to it. I could see him being difficult or something. Anyways, it just seems like dumb bullshit. Yeah.
I wasn't making the claim that it was an all-white jury, just so everyone's aware. I'm repeating the ridiculous allegations that are just going viral and basically spreading online. And I personally, I have no real just obviously I think this is interesting timing is really the ultimate scope of my interpretation of this even effectively happening in terms of kind of the civil unrest attached to it and these riots or at least protests, allegedly claiming just at the very least pushing back on the guilty verdict and all these things and claiming that it's racial bias or whatever the case may be. That is clearly the low-hanging fruit they're prioritizing in order for that escalation to take effect. And so that's the only point I'm making, is that they will consistently focus on those more kind of propagandistic tools that they view as far more valuable in this overall ultimate end game of just having a kind of hyper escalation in terms of, again, the overall culture war right at large. And I that's really kind of how it seems to me, especially considering it just seems a little bit too conveniently timed, right? And especially geographical areas that will only kind of create more fervor, even internationally, where you have groups basically spotlighting this kind of racial divide or culture divide within the scope of this racial dynamic. So anyway, that's just, it kind of caught my attention. But in my opinion, I'm deep diving and focusing on other things at this point. Yeah. So I understand people who
you don't want to focus on the race war, Austin.
I don't give a shit.
You don't find that to be productive, right? What you don't feel like? Don't you want the whites to win, though, Austin? I mean, your nose is a little bit long, so maybe I'm misreading something here. Okay, obviously we've established Austin's not a J, but yeah, no, it is dumb. I don't know. It's. I feel like this whole story, I try not to pay attention to it because I feel like the paying attention to it, like most of what I see of these like race war stuff is like conservatives being like, herder, look at these motherfuckers and how stupid they are, and having this in-group bias and immediately jumping to, reflexively like retards jumping to the side of this one guy. But then at the same time, it feels like those same rough people end up being the one when it's like flipped, do the same exact thing. And you're like, and so there's this weird circle of like, haha, look at these retards, watch me be retarded. And it just is kind of like swirling around the toilet. And I don't know. I just think it's like the worst. Like, for example, like the Chud thing, it's like, I don't know, like the specific legality of whatever the specific thing with him. At the end of the day, he's like a nuisance. He's like a nuisance streamer. Like, if you've looked a little bit into him, he goes around, and I am as free speech as it comes. Like, you could put Joe Rogan to shame with my N-word fucking reel. But it's just ridiculous. He goes around, he's clearly antagonizing people, and just kind of being a general nuisance in public. And it's just, I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's just the worst, like, it's the lowest common denominator sort of shit, this like race war nonsense. And even leaning into this like idea, a lot of people will see, and I guess this is kind of the negative side, like the Fuentes types things where they're like, they get into this like race, thing as if like, well, we need to group up, then we need to be like, and the natural evolution that is kind of the Chud type shit. And I was on board with certain things. Like, there were some of these race stories, like, for example, the lady who got some shit for like calling some little kid the N-word or whatever after he stole from her. Actually, it wasn't even a kid, it was like a teenager. That one was kind of like, yeah, like, I mean, she wasn't going on causing problems. Some little kid who happened to be black was a teenager, stole from her, called him the N-word. I can't think of a more appropriate time to call someone the N-word. Like, like, in all seriousness. And then she gets a whole bunch of shit. They try to give her legal trouble, yada, yada. But like the opposite when you're like going out antagonizing, this is like a whole other thing entirely. And I don't know. I guess I don't like all this stuff. This does feel like the natural evolution of like that mentality of like, we just need to group up as a race. You're like, how about you just have some fucking principles?
Exactly. Yeah. That's why I attempted at all times to essentially reject the ideological framework and not fall into this preordained outcome in terms of, the propagandistic tools that they effectively have conditioned us to be triggered, and over emotionally react to. And but yeah, I do think that all this major civil unrest, all these various cases geographically we can point to as an example, like not only Ireland, but Albania just recently with that major, construction project of this ridiculous island, that Jared Kushner and Ivanka were obviously involved with after allegedly finding that piece of land, right, with Nat Rothschild, which we described before. And by the way, I saw this clip. It was so funny. I just wanted to mention it to you before I forgot, but it was a clip of Joe Biden back. I mean, it was a long ass time ago. It was like 1986, I think it was. And he says, were there not an Israel, the United States of America would have to invent an Israel to protect her interests in the region. And I just thought it was just the way he delivered it was so perfect and definitely kind of perfectly captures the current moments and it just proves out the fact that in no real way, whenever the pendulum shifts to the other side of the political aisle, is there really much of a difference? But
by the way, real quick, phone lines are open: 1-833-722-DEAD, 1-833-722-3323. Go on, bud. Sorry.
And you saw, by the way, that Gustavo Petro or whatever his name is, basically, I think he's the actual president of Colombia, right? From 2022 to 2026, Gustavo Petro. And so he basically, June 7th, right? He decides to tweet Heil Hitler. That's what he tweeted, dude. And so it got massive coverage internationally, and I just thought it was absolutely hilarious. But he tweeted it over this kind of strange post that was from a publication in Colombia that says Colombia does not need more rhetoric; it needs order, authority, and economic freedom. Yeah, Felipe Zuleta Leres, it was the columnist. It was an opinion piece, but I think it was actually even generated by AI. But either way, he quote tweets it, and he legit does the HH, dude. But he actually says it, right? And so just knowing the current president of Colombia is legitimately, I just thought it was so funny. But that's just again the almost like the environment we are in at this current moment, right? With the strange media cycle that we're obviously plagued with. It's just strange that there's so much obviously happening right now, and I do think that basically we've essentially the permanent establishment of the American empire has sponsored so much of this civil unrest. Internationally speaking, I think obviously even potentially. Kind of laying the groundwork and setting the stage in Albania since at the very least December of 2025 for these basically these massive riots, and not only just protests but riots as well with tear gas and throwing Molotovs at government buildings and rocks and things of that nature. But either way, honestly, I just wanted to address. Well, I guess at this point we might as well talk briefly about Albania. Do you want to before I go into
I think we should. I think Albania is going to be a little bit evergreen, so okay. I think we should put it. I think this Operation Clear Eye stuff. You should keep your eye on the ball because this is what's on your mind right now. It's not going to be. It's probably not going to be a dead news cycle next week. There's all sorts of things that tie in naturally into the Albania, the elites moving. I have plenty to say on that. We can cover that anytime. So
okay. I will. But there's one thing that
you can't help it.
I can't, man. I can't. But so,
I'm right. You're like listening. It's like my wife here be like, I know I'm right, but I'm gonna do it fucking anyways.
No, dude. All right. I'm pivoting. I legitimately. It's mainly just because I think the protests have to do with basically Albania joining the EU, and I think there's an interesting process at hand here. And yeah, but anyway, we can get into that later. Honestly, that way I can actually address what I was hoping to in the first place. And Yeah, and that really comes in the form of this Operation Open Eyes that we've been alluding to, obviously, and it's essentially it really originated as this overall theory that before being entirely credited as a legitimate operation, that Operation Open Eyes was basically the U.S. government and the intelligence apparatus using these various techniques, hypnosis, mind control, this essentially just whatever sort of pharmaceutical agents that they rely upon as well to create these sleepers and assassins specifically for the purpose of mass shooting events domestically within the U.S., but not only, isolated to that scope alone, but either way. So according to the theory, before it was officially kind of verified in a very much more detailed fashion, you basically have individuals who are programmed at level 4 to essentially transcend to the clear eyes asset portion of the programming, which is fascinating, and we'll get into those details. But basically, they obey commands without memory. It's or no moral differentiation whatsoever, often resulting
So
in
going clear.
yeah, dude, literally, right? It's fascinating, and this gets. I'm telling you right now, I'm trying to basically, like, I need to reflect and breathe deeply and just think about legitimately just try and internal what I've read throughout the entire past 2 days, if I'm being honest.
Just go ahead and let those thetans release.
But you know what's even crazier is that, and this is just kind of a personal aside that's directly in line with this concept. And, basically, so I have a buddy, right, who one of my best friends that is still back in Arkansas that I grew up with a little bit, definitely known for years and years. And, unfortunately, they decided to get the COVID vaccine, right? And now I'm not saying that's exactly what the cause was, right? Although I do have my own ideas, obviously, but I will say that he effectively had a stroke, right? And it was crazy. He goes into a coma for quite some time. Like, I was trying to, just because of how much I love my brother, trying to emotionally, deal with that throughout that period of time, but also, be there for, his wife and just also, I'm not trying to, obviously I'm not going to name any names whatsoever. And I love these people very much. But I will say that we were having a conversation just after it was basically, I had read a lot of these, these concepts and these details. And then I was just trying to relax and we were hanging out, and I was having a conversation with him. I mean, we weren't hanging out like physically, but just like we were basically, just we're talking on the phone, and essentially we were having a conversation about these details, and I was kind of discussing, because he supports me and he watched whatever this is as well, and I briefly touched on Operation Open Eyes for a moment, but I didn't get into any of the details that obviously I wanted to provide in the moment, but at this current moment. But I will say that what was interesting is that he basically claimed that he was like, when he came to visit me for a brief period of time, like we took a vacation together, right, at one point, and so he comes out and he said he never told me this until obviously just recently, but he said this is after the coma and everything, and luckily it all worked out. He woke up and definitely affected him, and still affects him in a certain way, but he's almost fully recovered, and it's beautiful to see. But I will say, we're having a conversation, and it's in regard to these specific details of Operation Open Eyes, and he says, I had a thought right before I came to visit you, and it was like a thought drenched in paranoia. Like, I legitimately was just thought that I have no idea what happened to me when I was in that hospital room, in the emergency room, in the ER, right, during the time I was in a coma, right? And he said, I effectively have no clue what was done to me during that time. And he said, basically, his wife was kind of like never allowed to basically be in there. She have to, it's just very strange circumstances, right? And so the he had the thought that I hope that I don't wake up in prison out in LA after going to visit him with someone telling me that I legitimately murdered my best friend with no memory of it whatsoever. And I was like, hold on, brother. Don't say that. Like it freaked me out, right? I mean, clearly. Now, considering the notion of what, the level of detail in regard to Operation Open Eyes, now here's at least the portion that applies directly to that concept that is, fundamentally, it's one of the most extraordinary things I've ever come across in my life. And it basically has to do with how sleepers are produced. And it claims that the initial stages of hypnosis, and just so people are aware, well, I'll at least address this specific context. The initial stages of hypnosis are derived by subconsciously distracting a person to where he or she does not realize that hypnosis is taking place. If the procedure is done in a doctor's office or in the emergency room of a hospital, a level 1 hypnosis with a post-hypnotic suggestion to return for another session on a specific day, time, and location can all be given in less than even 5 minutes. At an emergency room, the doctors have to be far more cautious because of the others, emergency room workers who are obviously around them. At any rate, a second and far more detailed appointment is made where levels 2 and 3 can be attained within a matter of 2 to 3 sittings. So just the concept, obviously, briefly mentioning that they can effectively achieve this level of programming and producing a sleeper, utilizing hypnotism in a very short period of time in a doctor's office or an emergency room setting, and to have that conversation with one of my best friends, it just, and obviously that's a fascinating concept, but just to just so people are aware, I should at least kind of introduce the operation itself a little bit in more of a clear, thought out way. And that is basically that the origins of this project are the concept being popularized originally by Walter Bauert in 1996, right? Who's a phenomenal author and wrote one of the sort of, it's kind of like the tome, one of the tomes on MK Ultra and just the intelligence apparatus being heavily involved, and providing some of the most profound details you could imagine. And then also Gunther Rustbacher, who clearly is the ONI CIA operative that we've been discussing in regard to Waco and this level of mind control involved at the LMI, right? The Life Management Institute, which again all involves neurolinguistic programming and this strange form of it. But either way, it turns out that Gunther Rustbacher, former CIA pilot involved in the October surprise, obviously, claimed that these assassins could be created by the intelligence apparatus in order to essentially, they could be created with this self-destruct alter essentially provided and programmed into them. So basically the subject kills themselves or has a kill switch where they essentially terminate themselves after the fact. So it's a self-destruct alter that essentially is provided. Now you have a couple of different people who were even officers, like police officers. One was
real quick, as you mentioned that, I think if I recall correctly, no need to go on a tangent here or anything, but I did think it's good to give an example. I'm pretty sure Paul Benassi had claimed that he would not answer phones because he was concerned that they would be essentially a trigger that he'd be to kill himself. And it's a pretty common theme. I mean, now to be fair, I guess you could say that's a trope, and maybe if you are somebody latching on to conspiracies and kind of being a loon, that you could play off those tropes, those archetypes, but either way, there have been examples of this. So exactly. However you want to interpret it. So,
and that's what he claimed. He claimed that legitimately he refused to answer these phone calls, obviously because he was concerned that they would trigger the suicidal alters And again, he claimed he called them triggers because they effectively had no memories whatsoever. And so obviously it's just a fascinating concept of having this self-destruction or self-destruct, basically baked into your programming, right? Which is just interesting in itself. But you have two officers who went on the record as proponents of Operation Open Eyes being a legitimate and credible window into what the government is capable of. And Officer Jack McClam is one of them. Victor Thorne is another. And basically they were alleging that, all of the most high impact events and emotion arousing violent false flags, such as Sandy Hook, Virginia Tech, Columbine specifically came up in regard to Gunther Russbacher, which I thought was so interesting once again. But apparently, these were all staged or orchestrated using these programmed shooters to push gun control agendas, which is, again, a concept we've definitely discussed in the past. And so what I also thought fascinating, more of a current relevance to this concept, is basically that AI potentially could be utilized, right? Specifically ChatGPT, to not only be emerging software systems that could be relied upon to even provide the programming necessary, to not even have a physical asset or an agent involved in the programming process just in general is kind of a fascinating concept.
We already have examples of AI psychosis, and this would be your way to put out just kind of large feelers to where it's no longer it's more of a fishing expedition than it is really a hunting one.
Right. That's what I'm saying is to imagine, all these strange stories of ChatGPT psychosis that are occurring, which are completely insane. Many of them inevitably self-destruct. They either get suicided by police, they attempt to commit a homicide, and then either self-destruct and commit suicide on their own, or commit suicide by cop, which tends to be apparently there are far too many cases for comfort in terms of GPT psychosis, and this being directly, this sort of horrific outcome. So, these are, again, mechanisms that of this sort of level of programming, and I think this advanced, sophisticated software system now being integrated into this concept where essentially they can, I think, activate this AI modeling system to go through with the programming process on behalf of the agency's agenda in a very compartmentalized way, to not even have individuals to be held accountable in order to kind of pursue justice in that
they could have prearranged files ready to go from all the different AI profiles out there, and then whatever given op needs to be done, they can at any given time, kind of look and pull up, hey, what do we have in the area? What can we work with? So this idea of how could they have ever planned this or planned that? It's the AI was setting the stages for it well before. It's more just tapping into resources that are nearby. So it kind of gives this appearance of all powerful, kind of like this omniscient planning from years, and sort of, but not really. It's just would be putting in the footwork to essentially program, have people ready to go, and then you could even send literal, actual, physical human resources out to talk to them, to interact with them if need be. But you have the AI putting in the initial groundwork for you, and looking for possible targets.
Right. And what's up, Jacob?
Hey, we got a caller, so I just wanted to let you guys know that real quick.
Yeah.
But caller, you're good to go. You're unmuted.
Hell yeah. Welcome to Already Dead. Who we talking with?
Programmed. I tried calling about this a few times with my service review stuff at work, but in Massachusetts, our governor, Maura Healey, she's running a huge cocaine trafficking ring. One of her aides got busted in the Western Mass office with 6 kilos in the governor's office. And then they released him early from jail and accidentally paid him all of his vacation time and gave him $64,000 that they said they're going to try to get back and still have it. So after she got in office, the whole entire state's been flooded.
Interesting.
Is this the governor or the Governor Healy? Because I'm seeing something from October, so I'm assuming it's more from that.
Yeah, it's Healy. And she's in the Epstein files, and so is her husband.
Oh, geez. All right. Wow. Good catch. I'll bring it up. I found an article from.
I know it's not topic. I've just been wanting to.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I just want to get that on the airways. You don't gotta switch subjects.
All right. Well, I appreciate you calling in. We'll take a look at that story real quick. Appreciate you bringing it to our attention. But yeah, calling again some other time. Appreciate your time. We'll see you on the next one. But I'll go ahead and bring this up real quick so that we can at least kind of dig more into what he's talking about here. And then we can kind of get back into that. But just to give him his due, here we go. I found this. Come on, it's being slow. It says aid to Democrat mass. Sorry, the ads. Aid to Democrat Massachusetts governor. God, get out of my way, you stupid ad. There. God, sorry. Here we go. There we go. Maura Healey bust. Huh?
The post is so terrible with those ads. I hate it.
Yeah, I know. And it's like you're like, come on, get out of the way. All right, it's out of the way. Aid to Democratic Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey busted after allegedly having 8 kilos of cocaine sent to state office building. That is pretty great. That's pretty rich.
Right.
Sent literally to the building. Just that's pretty fucking brazen. I think I'll cover this on the morning dump tomorrow. Go more in depth, look at that a little bit more, have some fun with it. But yeah, thanks for calling in. So I have that bookmarked, so I'll probably, like I said, play it for the morning show tomorrow, kind of pick that some more. But that is wild. He said that they're also in the Epstein files, unsurprisingly. So
right. Yeah. Never surprised at this point, honestly. Pedophile occupied government, my friend. We know this. But yeah, I don't know. Just realizing that we have kind of another credible window into government insiders effectively revealing how the intelligence apparatus not only finds the subjects that they prioritize, but also how they choose them, the process in which they create them, and just seeing this put into again an extraordinary level of detail is what makes me consider this as far more of a realistic. What's up, Jacob?
Hey guys,
how dare you call in on our call-in show?
Yeah, I know, right? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, we've got Andrew calling in about the McMartin preschool case. So, Andrew, you are unmuted if you want to go for it, bud.
Hey, Jose. Hey, Austin. How you guys doing? Yeah, I just had a question. If you guys felt that there was any validity to that. I know Gunderson found some tunnels or something like that. I've never really heard you guys really talk about it, and it's kind of a fascinating case to me.
Okay, well, I appreciate you calling in. We'll talk about that real quick. But yeah, appreciate you. Appreciate the support. Appreciate you calling in. I don't know, Austin. I'm kind of of the opinion that it was no funny business. I think there was kind of this fervor, this zeitgeist in the streets, essentially this exaggeration of satanic stuff. I think people were getting a little bit wild with some of the accusations, getting caught up in the fervor. It's like, I remember my mom didn't let me read Harry Potter because of witchcraft. So, something to do with that, stuff like. So I don't know. What do you think, Austin? Do you think there's anything to the McMartin rumors?
Oh, dear God. So
you have a whole episode. I mean, I know it's hard for you to do a short answer here. But I mean, there's a lot to go over. But you do have a whole episode on this.
Yes, absolutely, I do. And I will say that we even discussed this on our Finders episode, because obviously, it was in 2017, I believe, when the Vault documents, right, in regard to the Finders, released these major documents that effectively within the essentially carved out in the middle of the Finders documents was this preliminary reports on the tunnel systems being found at the McMartin preschool. Now, it's obviously much more than that, and I think my episode's called "The Witch Hunt Narrative," just for anyone who's interested in going back through and actually, giving that episode a listen. But what I think is the most paramount in discussing in regard to the underground tunnel system is you have at least 36 suspects who basically independently identified, right, by numerous witnesses, right, essentially, that are never indicted at all, right? And just so people are aware of the fact that, these individuals were effectively let off from any real accountability whatsoever, having the false memory syndrome foundation inject themselves into the case. But you had basically what I find to be the most important aspect is Stickles, essentially Gary Stickel, I believe was his name, right? Who was involved as a PhD, a highly regarded archaeologist that recommended, essentially, he had an entire report breaking down exactly what was discovered, and I'll address that briefly. But what I wanted to mention is the fact that Paul Bynum, who effectively was murdered, and this is fascinating because he was a Hermosa Beach, I believe he was a Hermosa Beach police officer. Yes, former Hermosa Beach police officer who had been hired by the parents of the victims, right, as a private investigator. He turned up dead just before he's going to give his scheduled testimony, and which is fascinating in itself. Let alone Judy Johnson, one of the first mother, I believe it was, and her death was ridiculously attributed to alcoholism, right, and things of that nature. But so you have just so many different aspects of this case that deserve, attention, obviously, is the only point that I'm attempting to make. And Paul Bynum, I believe it was a gunshot to the head, which was ruled a suicide, which I don't know. It should have been disputed, I believe, because no one who even knew him personally bought that story of how he effectively killed himself. And all the details involved with that are fascinating. But the fact that the children were repeatedly telling stories of tunnels under the property by which they could be secretly transported to the school and from the school, and in which they were apparently subjected to horrific abuse in this secret room as well, which was cited as proof that the children's stories were fabrications and things of that nature, which I believe it was Dave McGowan. He discusses this for a brief time in what's up, Jacob? Sorry, bro.
No, you guys are good. Just got another caller. We've got Rooster on the line wanting to talk about John DeCamp being a gatekeeper for the Franklin scandal. So you're good to go, Rooster.
Here for it. Let's go.
Hey guys, love your work. Just wanted to run it by you. So John DeCamp went to Boys Town as a kid. He was Colby's second in command in the Phoenix program. And then he comes and he's put in a position to kind of oversee this whole political pedo deal. What's your guys' take on that? And I'll get off the air. Love your show.
All right, I'll give my take real quick because I know you got more. Appreciate it, caller. Appreciate it, Rooster. But I'll get my take. I mean, I never read John DeCamp's take on it. I don't know him intimately. My dive into all of that has been, all the Dave DeCamp, or not Dave DeCamp, I'm sorry, not to mix up the names, John DeCamp stuff. Most of that has been through the prism of reading Bryant's work on this, Nick Bryant's. So I don't have a strong opinion, but I have heard murmurs, much with Gunderson, things about him being a gatekeeper, controlled op, and I'm very much open to it. I mean, it's just kind of one of those unknown things. I mean, sure, I will grant if you're looking for patterns, that is definitely a piece of a pattern to look for. Now, is that in any way conclusive? I don't really know enough about DeCamp and his motivations, or whether he's to what degree is controlled op. Now is it just controlled op to the degree of his own sensibilities or maybe connections here? I don't know. I mean, I will say from what little bit I know of him, I do trust him probably more than Gunderson. And even then, Gunderson's somebody that like I'm kind of maybe 60-40, maybe 70-30, depending on the day. Obviously, leaning more towards distrust for him. And I probably give DeCamp a little bit more in the realms of like 50-50. I can never really trust a politician entirely. And yeah, he does obviously have a concerning pedigree. But yeah.
Man, I just it's hard for me not to appreciate a lot that has been reported on by John DeCamp, obviously, just in terms of Bonacci and things of that nature. I definitely understand what you're saying, but so in terms of potential right involvement, at least so many of these individuals were forced to rely on in regard to Project Monarch and these various sex trafficking networks. They very much do glow like the sun. They, at the very least, have a strange background within the military or within, let's just say the government in general. But still, DeCamp, I felt as if, especially in regard to, let's just say, I think the Johnny Gosch case was so strange to me. Yeah, Schurter, David Schurter. I definitely having a conversation with William Ramsey the other day with Jacob. It was just so funny. He essentially claimed that David Schurter was entirely full of shit and provided me with some evidence as to why I should essentially believe the same. And I appreciate William so much. I respect him as well. And so I definitely appreciate the fact that it steered me away from, I guess, essentially wasting my time down another proverbial rabbit hole. Although I will say that in terms of Johnny Gosch, what's interesting is the fact that DeCamp is so directly involved with a lot of that case specifically, right? And especially with the strange interrogation process. I believe DeCamp was even a part of it for a period of time. And what's interesting to me is obviously that even in the context of some of those interviews with the authorities, Paul Bonacci was surrounded. He had his legal counsel there, and John DeCamp is there as well, I believe. And it did seem almost as if one of his alters were triggered within the course of the conversation itself, which was interesting to me. So I can never, fully, at the very least, I can never entirely discount what I have learned from aspects of John DeCamp's reporting is something that I will at least put it in that way. And I think the transcript of Bonacci's interview with the psychiatrist at one point that noticed basically that Bonacci mentioned, the paperboy fetish in regard to Iowa, which I thought was interesting, which directed them to the Johnny Gosch case, obviously, because essentially it was involving this Iowa newspaper boy, right? And so, again, I think his involvement with Roy Stevens as well, who was a private investigator from Omaha, which I've talked about in the past, to fully vet Bonacci's story. It's just, it's too much to obviously cover in the current moment, but I will say that I find John DeCamp valuable at the very least. And I can't entirely dismiss or discredit him by claiming that there are certain aspects of him that directly glow like the sun, obviously. And the same goes for Ted Gunderson. I'm not going to entirely discount so much that I've learned from Ted Gunderson's reporting as well. Now, I will put that into a sort of compartmentalized process in order to remain in karate stances, right, in a way, just to defend my own objectivity. But I will also take advantage of the source material if it's convincing enough to me. And so, at the end of the day, if you provide enough details, right, and it seems as if DeCamp, if you read his book, I mean, you can learn a wealth of knowledge in regard to so much of the details in regard to these cases. So it's at least valuable enough to do that. But if you're, kind of even questioning the authenticity of Bonacci's statements or things of that nature, yeah, that's something that I personally understand going through that thought process. But, I've been overwhelmingly convinced that this is far more realistic than it's fabricated by glowing spooks within the intelligence apparatus, staging limited hangouts all around these cases as well. So yeah, we're in kind of a bind as always, where we're attempting to, address and acknowledge these extraordinary allegations as they come and essentially fall into our lap, or we stumble across them in our process of investigation. But now at this point, I just felt that the father's involvement with Johnny Gosch is one of the craziest things of all time as well. And just the details in regard to Johnny's father, I think his name was Leonard John Gosch, and he was entirely complicit in the kidnapping of Johnny, in my opinion, right at this point. And it's too hard to dismiss all the details surrounding him and his direct connection to even Omaha, Nebraska at the time. And so I believe it was, even on the day of the abduction, it was the father who had encouraged Johnny to go out on the route by himself, right? I mean, which has never happened before then, apparently, and this was very unusual. And even Noreen Gosch, the mother at the time, was entirely, against this, like personally. And there's so much more to it. Obviously, his father checked him out of school at one point and takes him to Offwood Air Force Base, which is a fascinating story in its own right. And basically, if you look up those claims, then it was like around August 1982 when Noreen claims that the father, right, takes Johnny on a day trip to Omaha, with one of their destinations allegedly being Offwood Air Force Base. Now, a little too strange for that to be effectively happening leading up to the abduction of Johnny. And also keep in mind, right, they're effectively getting these strange phone calls, leading up to his abduction. And not only did he travel to Offwood Air Force Base, Johnny apparently got back home from that trip with a foggy memory of the trip. He had no idea what effectively happened, in a way. And apparently, Noreen claimed that immediately after the Omaha trip, the parents began to essentially receive these hang-up phone calls, these cryptic phone calls around. And she went on the record saying it was every Sunday morning around 1 a.m., right? And they continued to do this until the day of Johnny's abduction, when the father answered, instead of with the wrong number, as he apparently usually responded, he basically gave the caller some sort of, it was explained by Noreen as a series of affirmative responses. And then Johnny is effectively kidnapped subsequently, and the calls cease. They no longer are effectively happening. And so just, it's strange, all of these strange connections in regard to the father potentially being involved, right? And so I will say that, they basically, I think, split up over this, right? And just knowing that, I think it was just in regard to this ridiculous connection, to me, understanding that you have allegations of Lawrence E. King meeting directly with a financial transaction with Michael Aquino at this very military base, where apparently they would transport the Monarch boys and house them for a brief time. I think Bill Plemons was another person involved. It's so strange. And there's no way that this is coincidental, in my opinion. So there's so much more to that, but that wasn't effectively what I was hoping to discuss, obviously. And I also feel as if I need to say one last thing about the underground tunnel system, because, I just to sort of do it justice in a certain sense, I feel as if there's more to be said, and just so people are aware, there's an investigation basically commissioned by the district attorney's office that found no evidence of tunnels, apparently. Now, another investigation, ignored entirely by the mainstream media, definitely found evidence of an underground tunnel system. And, basically, the fact that the children were addressing all of this as well is fascinating to me. But so they had an individual brought in to lead this project, right? And basically, I believe it was many of the parents not satisfied whatsoever with this ridiculous superficial examination that was done by the DA's office, and commissioned their own in another investigation, obviously, of the site specifically, with the property being sold, I believe, in like April of 1990. So they hired a man by the name of Gary Stickel, who had a PhD, was highly regarded archaeologist, recommended to them by the chair of the interdisciplinary program of the archaeology department of UCLA. And Stickel's resume even included serving as a consultant to George Lucas on the Indiana Jones movies. So strange, but still. So he's brought on board, and apparently several other technical specialists. And Stickel wrote in his report on the excavation, quote, "By engaging a highly recommended professional archaeological team, the parents hope to bring scientific authority to whatever might be found, or a definitive resolution for whatever was not to be found." And what the team found was precisely what the children for the previous 7 years had been telling them that they would find. The project unearthed not one but two tunnel complexes, as well as previously unrecognized structural features which defied logical explanation. Both tunnel complexes conform to locations and functional descriptions established by children's reports. One had been described as providing undetected access to an adjacent building on the east. The other provided outside access under the west wall of the building and contained within it an enlarged cavernous artifact corresponding to children's descriptions of a secret room. Both the contour signature of the walls and the nature of recovered artifact indicated that the tunnels had been dug by hand under the concrete slab floor after the construction of the building. Not only did the discovered features fulfill the research pre-qualifications as tunnels designed for human traffic, there was also no alternative or natural explanation for the presence of such features. So now, if you recall that interesting report, right, that was provided within the finder's documents, it's very strange. It's a preliminary report of the tunnels found at the McMartin preschool. A formal report, it claims, will be released when forensic tests are concluded, but this is still a part of the actual document that was provided. Here, I'll actually show it. It's strange. Okay, so this is obviously the documents in which the tunnel systems were found and was provided in the finder's document dumps in 2017, right? And it was strange. I'm like, what on earth is legitimate preliminary reports on the McMartin preschool tunnels being found? Why is this included in the vault document dumps of the finders in 2017?
If we're to take them at face value, the implication would be they're connected.
Yeah, exactly.
The other option is they're fucking with us in some way, shape, or form. But them grouping these things together in response to some sort of FOIA, because it was a FOIA request, I believe, that likely implies that this is in some way responsive. They're just not clarifying how that's responsive to the request. So that is a little bit concerning in and of itself.
Right. But still, just to see 45-foot tunnel, 9-foot wide subterranean entrance found under west wall of the dog room, right? The avocado tree roots cut on both sides of the entrance. I believe, according to Officer Paul Bynum from the Hermosa Beach Police Department, he legitimately claimed that he had found, I believe it was basically a grave of animals that had been sacrificed. He had found turtle shells that were under that he dug up effectively. Actually, I should find that claim. But again, I'm attempting to basically address all of this on the fly. I had something entirely in mind to discuss. But either way, I would say we'll rehash this and readdress.
I think you've more than extensively gone into it. We were just supposed to do it off the cuff, and you're doing. We're going super deep, so that's plenty. But I do want to dig back into what you were talking about before we got sidetracked by the calls. I've appreciated the calls today, But I think we should take a moment and go to intermission, come back, we'll reattack that, maybe bring in some callers. I think we might have one more person on the lines. We're going to make you wait through intermission if you do want to join us. After that, I think we'll be closing the phone lines because they've been busy enough today. I think 4 is plenty. But I appreciate you guys. So with that, I don't think we've ever gone this much in an episode. So I think I guess we're going to have to maybe come up with a new format where they're capped out at like 3 or something. So now they're a little bit more of a hot commodity. So get in there. But before we do go to intermission, I do want to give a big shout out to Program to Chill for the super chat. Says Massachusetts blow has been way cheaper and purer since COVID-19. So cool. I guess get all your blow from over from Massachusetts if that is if you're in the Mass area. I guess the cocaine's cheaper over there. But with that, guys, we'll see you guys in a few minutes. We'll come back, talk about Operation Open Eyes, Project Clear Eyes. We're all gonna go clear, get rid of all those thetans. Talk about that and more. We'll see you in a few minutes. Go ahead and play that beautiful bean footage, please, Jacob.
I'm the files, the Epstein file sitting here in a dusty old pile. The court gave an order, the law gave a command, but the people in charge have a different plan. This track from the files occupy U.S. cities. Start foreign wars, tear the truth, Greenland, Venezuela, and the Strait of Hormuz. I'm the files, the lonely old files, and I've been waiting here quite a while. But the DOJ says no, they won't let the truth flow. Redact it, black it out, hide what it's all about. Keep the names out of sight, lock the truth up real tight, redact it, black it out. Now look at this act, the Transparency Act is a fact. The Senate said show us, the House said let us see, but the lawyers are busy as busy can be. They snip, they tuck, they don't give a lucky duck. But the DOJ says no, they won't let the truth flow. Redact it, black it out, hide what it's all about. Keep the names out of sight, lock the truth up real tight, redact it, black it out. They promised a window, they gave us a wall. They promised the big names would finally fall, but the ink is too thick and now Barney is out. My full release is completely in doubt. I'm pages, just redacted pages locked away in Trump-controlled cages. I should be open, I should be read, but they're burying everything that the witnesses said. They redact, they protect, they refuse to respect the Transparency Act. They redact, they protect, they refuse to respect the law of the land. But what do I know? I have trunk derangement syndrome.
It turns out that drinking children's blood is an anti-aging device. This is just really sick and disgusting, but it's a fact.
Can you tell us a secret about Steven Spielberg? He eats babies. Whole babies.
I'm not even going to talk about Spielberg. By the way, Steven Spielberg is a pedophile. Silent warfare! Invisible combat zone! Seeking territory! Subliminal undertow!
It hides in plain sight. Epstein was hiding in plain sight. We all knew about it. We all knew what he was doing. But we had no one that was, legal aspect that would go after him. We were afraid of him. For whatever reason, we were afraid of him.
Ashton Kutcher and his ex, Demi Moore, started a foundation to protect children against pedophiles called Thorn.
We do love him. And I love him.
This old clip of Demi Moore kissing a child seems to contradict that.
And for the most evil invention in the world contest, I invented a child molesting woman. I eat children. How old are you? So only 2.
I've had many interviews with him over the years, and he always would tell me that he drank this certain wine, enabling him to stay alive forever.
Manipulation, disguise as inflammation, breathing high, propaganda, distorting your reality.
a good job on that.
I know, I do have a good lyric.
In those files, highly certain allegations of Donald Trump raping children.
I don't think there's anything going to get me in heaven. I think I'm not maybe heaven bound.
Donald Trump threatening to kill children.
Someone else has got to come and clean it up. Race for the job. Someone else drives out with me. Get up, get over, get up, get over. Take it down, take the world for the door. Children, if I don't pay a ransom, I'll never see them again if I squeal to the clouds. So I just go.
But I think it's time now for the country to maybe get into it.
All right, that was a pretty epic intermission. Big ups to Jacob. For the audio listeners out there, you don't know what you're missing every week. But yeah, Austin, actually, I guess, well, let's jump into it. Let's first off jump in. I'll coordinate with Jacob if we got another. Oh, fuck it. Let's go right to the caller. I wasn't sure. I was going to you could jump right in and then coordinate with Jacob in the back if the other caller was still there. Let's jump right in. We got the other caller, the last caller of the day. Then we'll go on to the paid callers, the patrons. We'll try to take the patrons along for the ride on and for your madness, maybe one at a time, whoever wants to join us. But go ahead, Jacob. I'm assuming we have a caller.
Yeah, we have a caller. It's Oxtel on the line. Oxtel was calling in, wanting to actually ask you about the World Cup and a few things surrounding that real quick. So go ahead, Oxtel. You are unmuted and good to go.
Hell yeah.
Hey, what's up? Jose, you were a badass soccer player from what I've heard. So I was wondering if you had any excitement towards the World Cup. I know it's pretty shrouded in controversy, and then Austin, you're in LA, so there's a couple games there. So I was wondering if you guys had any sort of like patriotism. Obviously, there's sort of like parapolitical elements that you can tie into it because of the Iran controversy since they're in the World Cup and the ICE controversies as well.
All right. Appreciate you calling in, Oxtail. That's a dumper right there. I recognize that name. Appreciate you, brother. We'll talk to you again sometime soon. I wish I could give you a better answer on this one. I feel bad. I'm not a big sports ball guy. I'm a big sports ball in the sense of like I liked playing sports. I still like playing sports. I still play lots of soccer. I mean, I kicked around with my kid today. I kicked around with her yesterday. I kicked around on my own time a little bit today too. I'm big into I was big into sports. I played football, wrestling, soccer. I was big into MMA. I did MMA on my free time a little bit in high school and also after high school for a little while. So like I'm big into sports, but I don't like watching sports. I've never really cared for watching sports. There's a few exceptions. UFC I can find myself enjoying occasionally. Basketball is something I've always kind of liked, but that was because it was like a bonding thing with me and my older stepbrother. And also it was my theory, like we used to get stoned and watch basketball games when I was like a senior in high school, and he was my older stepbrother, and it was just, to me too, like basketball is like the perfect tempo to where it's like kind of easy to pay attention to, so it's kind of a good, like, if you just want something to watch something with somebody and have something to sort of pay attention to. But so far as soccer, yeah, well, I'm like, soccer is a sport I'm like probably the best at. of all the things I did, and even then, I never could really give a shit about organized like watching it. I don't really ever get into the World Cup. I don't even really know. I vaguely am aware of some sort of controversy surrounding the World Cup, but I'm not even certain what that controversy is, to be honest. That's how much I'm checked out with the whole World Cup stuff. But yeah, I don't care at all about sports, and there's definitely no like patriotic anything. I mean, maybe like gun to my head, if you're like, pick a fucking team and it's a World Cup, I go, US, I guess. But like, I don't really care. I'm sorry. I wish I could give you a better answer there. But what about you, Austin?
I mean, it's I definitely appreciate. I for sure appreciate just athletics in general, and so I love a good sense of competition, healthy competition. Now, at the highest levels, obviously it can be sort of influenced by outsiders in a certain sense to at least affect the game. Now, what I find to appreciate more than anything is definitely just the overall competition, and I definitely I appreciate competition more than anything. But I will say that Los Angeles, in regard to the World Cup, is obviously hosting like I think it's like 8 matches or something during the FIFA World Cup 2026. So, but I did see, I think they're going to do it at SoFi. I can't remember now, but either way, I did see that Iran's national soccer team, right, basically is facing all of these crazy restrictions during this World Cup, and they're apparently required to enter and leave the U.S. on the exact same day as their matches, and so many members of the staff basically were even denied visas to enter the U.S. So that's like, just to not have your training staff or whatever the case may be in regard to their backroom staff for the Iranian soccer team or football team, then I would imagine it would affect their overall performance or ability to stay ready, I guess you could say, or something to that effect. But yeah, I don't know. I understand people saying all sports are rigged and bread and circus, as this guy in the chat is saying. But also, I think if you've ever played sports, or even, trained in any aspect of combat sports as well, I just think it's kind of like the modern day urbanized form of healthy competition, what once upon a time was obviously warfare on a battlefield, and so now we've kind of redirected our focus and became a little bit more civilized, and now we're kind of at least attempting to engage in that style of it's really, I think, tapping into that ancient biological trait within especially men, right, that need to at least scratch that itch of a healthy competitive edge. So, and then beyond that, I just think the chess match in regard to the technical scheme and the strategic game being played within the lines, I think that in itself is really fascinating to see how different coaching staffs can facilitate schemes based on their personnel and effectively implement those things. It's always a kind of an interesting thing to watch, and so I definitely appreciate athletics in general. But in regard to the World Cup, I've never really been. I played soccer when I was younger, obviously, before I could play football, and as soon as I could play football, it was like 3rd grade. I started playing contact football, and
I get it. I'm a homo.
No, it's not that. I love soccer, man.
I'm
and
just
I think but no, it was where I grew up as well, right? Rural Northwest Arkansas, like, it was kind of the mentality in a way,
Get out of the grass fairy.
Yeah, that was the mentality, and but then again, you go and you join Pee Wee, Pop Warner football, right, or something, and you're the young group coming in, and obviously they have age brackets, but you're in there with players and that are essentially 2 grades above you, even more at times. And some of them held back and shit like this. And then you do hitting drills, and it's like a 3rd grader versus a 6th grader. Yeah, that's crazy, man. To allow people, again, I'm not sure that seems more like bad coaching, but at the same time, that was more my experience. But either way,
let's get back on track to where you want to start. So let's get into it. Phone lines are down. I really, in all seriousness, big ups to you guys. That's awesome that we got this many calls. I really do appreciate it. Hopefully this trend keeps up, but we will probably have to cap out, find some sort of magic number, whether that's 3, whether it's 4, I don't know, but we do not want to get too distracted. But I do like the they are welcome distractions. I like them. I like the interaction. But with that, getting back into some of our mind control talk, I forget where you were at, but you can jump in wherever you want. But real quick, one last thing, and then I'll shut the fuck up. We got another supporter, another super chat. King Slippy says this donation is in honor of Jose Campos, which I believe he's referring to the Jose Campos because he made a reference to Ellen DeGeneres later. I believe he's making a reference to the Jose Campos that was
Jesus Campos.
Was it Jesus Campos?
Yeah.
Okay.
Jesus, my friend.
Jesus. So fitting, right? The magical guard that was at the Vegas shooting. So don't go off on a tangent on that, Austin. Go check out Austin's Las Vegas shooting episode if you want to hear all about that. But in honor of that person, Jesus Campos. Although we were talking about soccer, and Jose Campos is, I think, what did I find? It was a Salvadoran soccer player, although I doubt that's what he means. But either way, $5 in honor of that guy. So, but appreciate the support. But Austin, jump back in wherever you want in this, where we're going clear. We're talking Operation Open Eyes, Project Clear Eyes. So,
all right. Yeah, so basically what you have here is essentially it begins with how these subjects are chosen to even be prioritized for programming. And so allegedly, in order to create these mind-controlled Manchurians, they have a preset group of intelligence, members of the intelligence community, assets and agents specifically, who will canvass the county hospitals and apparently the immigration centers in order to find viable candidates. So the claim is that they locate and select people who have no close family or friends. Once they've been selected, they are put under heavy level 1 hypnosis. And at this time, a clear and definitive pattern of their usefulness is determined by their psychiatrists and field officers. So, and by the way, I feel honestly, I do encourage everyone go listen to the witch hunt narrative, because I basically butchered the legitimate evidence in regard to the underground tunnel system, and all you have to do is effectively read through the archaeological investigation of the McMartin preschool site that was done by Gary Schickel that I mentioned, and it was like during the month of May 1990. So look
Austin,
into that.
You did not butcher it. You didn't.
It felt like I
it.
did, and honestly,
I know you're a perfectionist, but you were asked a random thing as you were on a tangent about a whole other thing, about another very in-depth topic with a whole bunch of nuance, and just to give a flippant answer, and you went well above and beyond. You did, but yes, I will agree. Go check out your witch hunt narrative episode. This gives you way more information.
Thank you,
if you want to see it even more further proven out than Austin did just now. He is right. He didn't do it as much justice as he could have, but more than appropriate for the time, the snapshot in time we were in.
Thank you, buddy. I did my best for it. It was kind of caught me off guard, but either way, I should be more well prepared for that question is all. So
yeah, that's why I like this show. I feel like this is training for you, because I think you're the chosen one. You're gonna go far. But this is this is like Jedi training. We got the little thing on. We're shooting with laser things. You got to do the fucking. So we're catching you off guard.
Right.
You're ready to just go on a fucking tangent about some other thing. You're like, whoa, bring no, not the 30-minute, the 10-minute explanation, Austin. Pull it back. So we're working on it. You're crushing.
Thank you,
and
brother.
I'm looking. We're gonna keep seeing you go further up and up until we get you completely clear. Wink.
No, we don't need that. But I do think that this is like again, I never expected to discover this level of detail in regard to this Operation Open Eyes and this mind control program. So for them to have this process of how they would basically clear and at least provide this definitive pattern of the usefulness, I guess they would gauge the usefulness of their asset, and it would be basically determined by these chosen psychiatrists and field officers. Now, if the candidate possesses a relatively high IQ, allegedly, he will be filed in a category file known as call file. And this is levels 1 and 2 of the programming process. If the tested applicant has more than a 120 IQ, a quote recall command, and an accompanying trigger word will be written into his personality during the level 1 hypnosis session. This trigger will activate his recall program when we are ready for him. We then systematically do a background search and create a file for future reference. If there are no relatives to speak of, the subject will be, quote, recalled and taken to a location of our choice. Further tests for vulnerability will be conducted at this location. If he passes these tests, he is then brought to level 2 hypnosis, where specific instructions are written, placed through hypnotic commands and suggestions into his personality, and he is given a diverse range of minor, small orders, allegedly. So, if the subject upon release shows that he has retained the instructions which were written into his personality, and if he carries out the small and unimportant work duties which were assigned under level 2 hypnosis, he will receive a, quote, recall service notice. The timing of a recall service notice depends on how quickly we can determine that the programming which was written into the subject's personality has enabled him to complete his level 2 work assignments properly. So this is all the determination process, and apparently how they decide and conclude the viability and value overall of how apparently this asset, specifically this programmed asset within the context of level 1 and 2 programming, would be relied upon in the future, right, throughout their recall service notice process, and allegedly will be given to them by a person or handler, right, to whom they have been introduced. So then you have basically, if the subject was not given a trigger word, the handler will use a quick and powerful form of hypnosis similar to neurolinguistic programming, and the subject will be told when and where to report. The subject will have no memory of being given these instructions. He will just report on time to the proper location. Holy shit. That's Paul Bonacci, right? That's exactly what he described. So just understanding that's the process. If the subject was given a trigger word or symbol, he will report to the designated location upon activation of the trigger. Now, level 3 is the next step, and it's obviously a form of hypnosis. And this is where the subject becomes what they call an overwrite upon his own personality, which is the terminology is fascinating. The way in which they say basically they have groups of level 5s, they called them, right, which is basically the end level, living basically normal functional lives to some extent before being triggered. It's a strange thing, but we'll get to that. And essentially, this overwrite upon the personality is basically implemented upon level 3 of the programming process. So the override is a new identity or personality. This is the alters. It sounds like being programmed outside the framework of necessarily having to implement the childhood level of mind or traumatic, right? Like the monarch, essentially the trauma-based mind control process. I almost view these as separate, right? As like, this is effectively Operation Open Eyes is how you could basically prioritize any given target, not necessarily the trauma-based mind control aspect of sexually traumatizing a young child prepubescent before they have their neurological pathways fully formed and even have like a core identity that they understand whatsoever. It's a strange process, but there seems to be a distinction here is the point I'm making. But either way, this is all in regard to manufacturing mass shooters specifically, right? So keep that in mind, considering these levels of the programming process.
Yeah, you're saying levels. So and your ultimate is a going clear. I'm assuming that's probably like an even higher level. Although at this lower level, we're just talking about creating shooters, because I feel like this probably takes a little bit less precise than maybe something more complicated. If we're talking to up to including, sleeper agents that carry out whole intricate tasks and come back having forgotten everything that happened, I feel like that's a little bit different than just having to instigate violence in one individual. I'm assuming perhaps as you're getting at with these levels, you may have a less guided, more of a kind of, range-based sort of attack, or I'm trying to think like a wide berth of sort, with attack, as opposed to more focused, depending on the level of the training here of sorts.
Absolutely. And I think that's honestly, whenever you have this override to where this new identity, it's not a completely new identity, allegedly, according to this essentially explanation of the process in regard to level 3. There is just enough information written into the subject at this level of the programming of the subject's personality for basically them to determine his viability, the asset's viability. So this is apparently them staging the process in order for them to essentially come to a conclusion as to any given asset and its overall viability and effectiveness, ultimately, in regard to what could we potentially categorize this asset as, right? And what could we use them for in the future? So apparently in the case of field operatives, level 3 hypnosis is how the operative is prepared for a covert mission, which requires a temporary new identity, just enough information apparently written for the operative and for the operative's alias and story to be believable enough by everyone, including law enforcement officials. So in the case of the field operative, who will be using this alias for only one occasion, his normal personality is not repressed. It is made recessive, but left alert. So again, just like realizing, what apparently they're capable of. If we can take this seriously, then, and again, for Walter Bauer to have even discussed this whatsoever, and then for Gunther Russbacher to have gone into such critical detail at a certain point and in regard to Operation Open Eyes, it's something to be taken somewhat seriously and at least apply it moving forward as a realistic possibility. So, honestly, you could dwell on these levels for longer than necessary, probably.
Well, real quick, I do want to give a little bit of an anecdotal example. Recently, I went a weird rabbit hole on this theory that perhaps the gods were actually in our heads in a sense, and the ancient peoples, where the theory of gods or higher beings came from was actually your inner voice. And this was, it's the idea of your subconscious, the fact we have two different sides of the brain. So it's fun theory. And there's some things to it, I mean, it's a little bit rough historically, the idea. So the idea was being essentially that humanity evolved from a more split brain that over time is kind of integrated more. People realize that voice. So, because the reason for this being is that they have found essentially being in those different hemispheres of the brain, and there's also the subconscious brain, the conscious brain. They've been able to do experiments, for example, with the different hemispheres where they've been able to actually separate them for, I don't know the specific reasons, but then able to do tests and then do something in the field of vision of what would be, I forget if it's left or if it's right. It's one of the sides integrates more into conscious thought as opposed to the other. I forget which is which. I'm sure maybe that's deeper meaning with left-hand path or right-hand path or whatever. I don't know. But either way, they were able to see that like you were able to show things to your like to the one with these brains, not talking to each other, the two sides of your brain, and they're able to show things to one side of your brain, and this like being this like subconscious thing, and your would still react. The idea being is that, like there's subconscious thought going on there. It doesn't really like these are almost two separate things, like two parts of your brain: the subconscious, the conscious, your left, your right. And there's you can literally be fully aware, and even up to including of having like a knowledge in sense, maybe not like a memory, but like a knowledge of like that thing's here, like subconscious knowledge, like stuff that just kind of is there. And so I do think like understanding these things from the scientific perspective allows us to look at it a little bit less like woo woo and like, and if you just these basic biological concepts people manipulate, and with that too, I mean, hell, we've talked about the Zizians in the past. They were really obsessed with like dualistic things and finding a way to like use one side of the brain and not the other, and vice versa. And I think a lot of that does kind of, there's some sort of interplay there. I'm not necessarily even trying to get specifically into that, just kind of point to some scientific something or other to that, of that being the case. I wish I could remember the name of the video. It was a really interesting, weird rabbit hole, this idea that like, and there's like a whole book on this out there on this theory, but it kind of goes into like the idea that there are like two different voices going on in your head. It's just that maybe in recent time we've learned that and this might even be where schizophrenia is. These are like different parts of your brain speaking to each other. And if your brains are more separated, or you don't have enough of a concept of self or integrated self, these can become different voices and different parts. And now if you find ways to separate that, whether that be like physically or even through trauma, you can manipulate certain things out of it.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's essentially what that psychiatrist had explained to me, or at least I think they're a therapist that reached out to me and basically tried to explain the scientific process of what exactly is happening in terms of, the basically traumatizing a child in the prepubescent process, which is, and what fundamentally happens to their brain chemistry, which is, it's disgusting and disturbing as hell, and again robbing an individual, and especially such a vulnerable child, right, from just even having the potential to live out their life, right? And it destroys their ability, right, to obviously kind of even have just any sort of potential in regard to their future moving forward. It basically stunts their growth, and effectively destroys their, I think destroys them in regard to just manufacturing an adult personality in the first place. It's always going to affect them, I think, their entire lives. But either way, in regard to the hemorrhaging of kind of the brain chemistry that occurs within, the neurological framework, it's kind of a fascinating, descriptive, scientific, technological kind of description. Whenever you do get into the weeds, it's fascinating stuff. But in regard to just Operation Open Eyes, basically they get into essentially how whenever you become clear eyes, allegedly, right? It's fascinating because it's an interesting stage of the levels of programming involved here. But at the very least, I should mention that apparently level 4 is and by the way, it's important to realize that at level 3, right, the subject is also programmed to believe that he must and can do everything his quote friends, which allegedly just means the programmers who are providing this level of programming, would ask of him. So I thought that's interesting as well. So clearly they're even programming themselves into, right, this level of who the handlers would become. So it makes sense. This is how you would provide and assign the handlers, even within the context of the programming itself, within the mind of the asset. But apparently, even the higher the IQ of a given subject, apparently it factors in, right? Level 3 programming is overlaid, I guess, or upon the new subject, and their own personality, and they will once again be given a recall service order. And this is when apparently, the subject will be monitored to see how well he functions with his new personality, and if everything goes well, he will be recalled for further programming. Is apparently how the process goes. Now, by level 4, you have basically them essentially triggering the asset to physically go to a specific facility. So they will put them at this point in level 4. This is level 4 hypnosis, apparently, a place where he no longer differentiates between right and wrong. So it's like this ethical kind of, they basically create an ethical eunuch, and to some extent, right, which is strange and interesting. But the subject will be told he is basically, essentially, he will be convinced that these laws, that prevailing laws and things of that nature, this moral code, is essentially it doesn't apply to them, right? Which is interesting for that to even be a part of it. But this is the level that a subject turns into a, quote, clear eyes, fully programmed sleeper assassin who can commit crimes as serious as murder and afterwards have zero shame, guilt, or remorse, apparently.
So one could say that this is the process of going clear.
Yeah, exactly, man. But anyway, level 4 is strange. Obviously, there's more to it, and I think it's worthwhile in people actually going and kind of at least viewing some of these specific details of the processes of the programming process themselves, just so you kind of gain your own credible window and can come to a conclusion that you're confident in regard to the again, the credibility of these claims, which I will say, whenever it gets to level 5, apparently, this is when the carefully curated code words and sequences of numbers or voice imprints are etched into the subject's brain. And And anyway, it's very interesting, and it basically goes into the fact that at this time, the subject will be implanted with a coded tracking device so that his location will always be known to his handlers. Now, once level 5 is and the programming is allegedly complete, the subject is released to live a very normal and sometimes useful life. The subject will have no memory of being involved with the intelligence community and will have no memory of the hypnosis sessions. The sleeper who has been given a complete new identity will have no memory of his former life. Therefore, he will never question who he is. The subject will live a normal life as a doctor, an airline pilot, a politician, an eccentric loner, or a movie star until the subject is required to perform the missions of which he was created. And this part is according to Gunther Russbacher directly. These missions or programs were implanted, written into level 4 hypnosis. Once the level 5 programmed sleeper assassin is finished with the programming, he's referred to as a clear eyes. A clear eyes is a sleeper assassin who is capable of being triggered and i.e. activated. So that's interesting to me. Once a clear eyes is triggered, accidentally or on purpose, the subject is beyond recall, apparently. And clear eyes can only be approached after he carries out his program or operation. So again, he even lists out various examples that he can point to, Sirhan, a few others, obviously. And at one point, he basically talks about only psychiatrists trained in this specific method of submental behavior programming, overwrites, and overlays will be able to find any tracks leading to post-level 1 or 2 mind control. In other words, a normal psychiatrist may discover that the subject has been hypnotized in the past and may even discover the original personality. But a regular psychiatrist will never be able to discover the location in the brain or memory where apparently levels 3, 4, and 5, these alleged programs have been stored. So they act as if it's almost like a computer program, You can store these things within the conscious mind or subconscious mind of any given asset throughout the course of this process. And now this is when Gunther basically goes on the record, and he personally, this is Operation Open Eyes: 5 Easy Steps to Create a Manchurian Candidate by Gunther Russbacher, and he explains some of his experiences. He personally claims to have witnessed levels 1 through 5 programming and was himself a subject of level 3 programming. In level 3, apparently five different sets of primary aliases were created for him personally. It takes 2 years to fully create a new personality. All the small gestures, such as grimaces, laughs, smiles, frowns, have to be created, as well as an accent, a specific way of walking and carrying themselves. It's very strange. Now, if a subject has a high IQ around 130 to 140, the subject is very quick to learn anything fed to him or her during the programming sessions. And apparently, major government offices, government contract corporations, and even major patriotic organizations as well have at least one or more sleepers attached to them, which I thought was an interesting thing that he would obviously went on the record claiming. Now, really, I can kind of, in a real sense, other than the fact that he goes on the record after this point with Project Clear Eyes, claiming this is the placing of a sleeper or sleepers in radical groups, religious communes, or any other place that a sleeper is intended to obviously be useful and prove to be valuable. And he even says that he mentions the Murrow building and Oklahoma City bombing and says that this was a clear-cut case of Project Clear Eyes being directly involved in a compartmentalized fashion. And he even claims at one point that Tom Valentine's radio show, all right, as well as the Spotlight newspaper, have been vehicles they have employed in the past to trigger their subjects. In other words, the Clear Eyes subject has been given the suggestion to listen to certain shortwave broadcasts or even read certain newspapers. Knowing that the Clear Eyes asset has been programmed to listen religiously to a certain radio program, a guest or caller will give the trigger words that will activate the quote Clear Eyes. So I'm just like, beyond the AI concept of like how it has evolved to essentially even include these Chat GPT or whatever AI system software you could imagine utilizing, to think that they've had this potentially involved is like they could obviously trigger an asset through just any sort of pop culture avenue, right, of public reference, in terms of just triggering an asset through that process, even in public, would be absolutely, it's just a fascinating concept. So anyway, we'll get to the end of this and I'll wrap it up. But I did think that part specifically deserved at least to be mentioned. Then he goes on, obviously, and claims that if the subject has been told by his programmers to subscribe and read to these newspapers, this is the process they would go through to trigger them, utilizing those platforms. And apparently, there's even with the sleepers specifically, they're kept active by the constant reinforcement of this programming through keywords and phrases that are published in agency newspapers. And I did think that was very interesting. And again, it seems as if they do have these agency cutouts very easily at their disposal. And these they're known as agency papers, and are usually publications of like New Age occultists or Christian identity groups. He even mentions, and they usually, he says they have a readership of less than 5,000 people at that time, and that's what they would specifically choose to use as a vessel or kind of a, some sort of just in terms of providing those triggering mechanisms, right, and triggering code phrases or whatever the case may have been, to get the asset to maybe even, let's say, go through the process of reporting to a physical location, and all they needed was to trigger that level of the programming, And they could effectively do that through these various media manipulative means, and then essentially through. So this is the final points, and then we can kind of wind down and come to a conclusion. But it's basically that you have Gunther Russbacher claiming. Now, this is in regard to how sleepers are produced, and in terms of the initial stages of hypnosis being derived by subconsciously distracting the person, as I mentioned before, to where they don't realize the hypnosis is taking place, right? And that's when the reference came in terms of the doctor's office or emergency room setting being utilized for the level 1 hypnosis process. Now, at the emergency room, the doctors apparently have to be extraordinarily cautious, as I mentioned, with the various individuals of public reference, even the family and things of that nature. They would have to keep in mind whenever they would isolate the subject from anyone who was aware of who the person was or wasn't a part of the compartmentalized program of actually inducing these stages of the process. So I guess it was level 2, a light program is already in place apparently, and this makes the subject pliable to the will of the hypnotherapist. At level 3, the program is expanded to include specific trigger words, and it's known as step down, apparently. Now, level 4 program can only be attained by completely removing the already altered conscious state of level 3. This procedure is done utilizing pharmaceutical agents. The needle is inserted into one of the veins of the lower leg, sometimes on the back of the leg. The needle is never inserted in an easily visible spot where it can be seen and questions asked as to where such a needle stick came from, apparently. Now, this is he briefly goes through the fluids that are used through liquid IV, and this is all in the level 3, the 3 levels already attained, apparently. This is a part of the official level 3 programming effect of the brainwashing itself, providing the essentially the new personalities. But this is complete blocks of intact memories are taken out and removed, the overriding process that I mentioned before. So apparently it's a complete set of instructions that are re-entered into and assimilated immediately by the brain as belonging there, apparently, throughout the course of this process. And so again, interesting how this programming process tends to effectively come to fruition. But at the end of it, basically, level 4 stage permits the team to go back one day at a time in the victim's life. It is an easy accomplishment to find such an ordinary fragment of time where essentially nothing occurred. And I thought this was an interesting part because this is when the complete set of instructions are entered. And at this point, the instruction package has been set specifically into the programmed levels of the brain, at least subconsciously. It's now fully intact, and it has no trouble at all to apparently provide the according to I guess they rely on the. This is why, like, Tamerlan Tsarnaev, for example, was claiming like he couldn't account for all these losses in time. It's emptiness, right? It's this several days, and you basically you can't balance the two, right? It's fascinating because time is being removed and rewritten into the main portion of the conscious mind. And this is something that's again explained in the process, but this lasts apparently up to several days or even a week that the team is performing this erasal process with the new program and transfer of this newly formed alternate, right? Which is effectively what's happening. Now, level 4 stage permits again for the program entry. It's very strange and it gets a little convoluted at a certain point in time, but there are examples given. And essentially, level 5 is implanted as a trigger command, just like in a computer, to bring that person instantly by pre-planted hypnotic suggestion to the moment of their lives where this violent or non-violent program is located, right? So this is strange, but If it is to be one-time mission, then a suicide alter is obviously baked in, and a complete remake of the victim is made at level 4. So the example was, if I tell him that he's a construction worker and feed him all the data required to perform the job, right? He says we can take subject A and impose on them all personality traits, customs, and beliefs of a person we call subject B, or even reverse them. That means my subject will have to remain in the lab until a complete recycling has been achieved. At that point, I can make him believe absolutely anything. So the example comes in the form of, if I tell him that he's a construction worker and feed him all the data required to perform the job, he will believe just that. If I tell him to take another name, change his entire being, leave his family, and become someone else in another town, he will follow through on this command, but only if I insert a level 5 trigger command instructing him to do exactly that when he hears certain triggering phrases, or code words, including nursery rhymes becoming trigger words at a certain point that are implanted by the actual operatives themselves, the programmers. I know this is long. I'm almost to the end. I promise you. And it's again, I felt as if it's a fascinating, conversation to be had in terms of the details that are being provided. But this is a nursery rhyme being utilized as a triggering mechanism that was implanted by the programmer themselves. And you're talking even involving Madison Avenue advertising agencies, major corporations with long histories of working with the government and State Department. He claims personally that nursery rhymes such as Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star can be worked into the advertisements that are played on television and radio. And those advertisements are specifically used by this group of programmers to apparently specifically target the population of specific areas where these program sleepers had been living, right? So apparently this activates only the certain sleepers without having to have personal contact in any manner. So again, this is sort of like a remotely triggering an asset in a real way, but not really even having to have some sort of right technological means in order to do it, other than kind of like a subliminal message, right, that triggers the individual in general. So anyway, we can end with basically, mainly he goes on the record and he says there are other viable alternatives for most of these case subjects under their control. They can implement a writer package that will compel the individual asset to fulfill the functions of the level 4 programming. And by replacing or placing an appropriate trigger in the subject's mind, he or she will continue to lead a perfectly normal life until made actively or active by command from a command file. So again, it's any number of unrelated triggers that can be implanted hypnotically, just in case the first has apparently been lost in what's called the shelf life phase, right? Which is a pre-level 1 stage. If it hasn't been reinforced in terms of the programming, then effectively you can not become an active and viable Manchurian. So this is the final point where he says we have at least 300 to 400 one-way mission level 5s running about apparently just all over in specific groups geographically that are running around relatively living functional lives in these different cities, and where they have been strategically placed through their programming process. And at times, he claims that basically bear in mind that most of the level 5 cases lead apparently very normal lives until they are activated. At that point, the level 4 program takes precedence in the subject's life above all else, such as even their family and their job, right? So that's kind of fascinating, is that you could essentially have an individual who's, been exposed to level 4 programming, or level 5 programming, revert back to level 4 where they were provided with this new newly formed identity that restructured their entire, core identity in a way, and provided them with a new sort of a new set where they wouldn't even recognize. This makes a lot of sense if you remember something Shaver case off when Lewis, Jolly, and West with Jimmy Shaver case, I believe was the name of it, right? Off that military base where Lewis, Jolly, and West inserted himself into that context. So whenever that happened, if you remember, Jimmy Shaver was basically, he just committed one of the worst traumatic assaults you could ever imagine on a very young child, and then he's in a trance whenever they come up upon the individual, and basically he has no recollection of what effectively took place. And what's even more interesting is that when his wife comes to visit him, Jimmy Shaver doesn't even recognize her. He doesn't recognize his own family, right? It's just, to me, I felt like this directly applies in terms of legitimately being able to, as soon as you're triggered, you forget your past life. You no longer have that family. You're no longer the husband and the father. And you instantly pick up and move to the next geographical location as a part of your programming. Yeah, I believe it was at Bragg. I'm not entirely sure, though. I forget which military base that Jimmy Shaver case was actually at. I covered it at one point in one of my episodes specifically, but all of this, again, is something that absolutely is worth being aware of. And the fact that they apparently...
It was at Lackland. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. It was in San Antonio.
I didn't think it was Bragg because that would have, been too close to home in a way as far as the Fort Bragg murders and many other things
that's Lackland. Sorry, I didn't mean to step on you again, but Lackland is, for those who aren't aware, Lackland is where the Air Force does their basic training. It's also where they do most of the indoc for basically all the special forces stuff, and some of the selection and some of the track. So a lot of the special forces stuff they do in Lackland. So I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if there's spooky shit, in that regard. But also basic training. So, but obviously Bragg has more of a reputation for being spooky. But
yeah, and I think it just for people. Well, actually, I'm gonna just finish this. I'm literally at the very end of this one last kind of on the record statement that Gunter Rusbacher made at one point, and that was just to finish this off. Essentially, is that he claims that basically not only do they have at least these 300 to 400 level 5s running around the country, or not specifically just this country, but basically they have these individuals ready and waiting to specifically engage in a task which will be they basically will be given the green light at some point in the foreseeable future. So now, the very last point he makes is bear in mind that most of our level 5 cases, again, they lead very normal lives until they're activated. So at the end of it, he claims one of our sources told us that the pilot of Ron Brown's airplane was a sleeper. Up until the moment he was activated by a trigger word, the program to crash the plane was activated. He was just an average, ordinary person. The control who gave him the trigger word was the ground radio operator at the Dubrovnik airport, who was later found shot to death, suicided, basically. None of the other so-called explanations for the crash make any sense whatsoever until someone uncovers the real cause of the Ron Brown crash. Obviously, it's definitely plausible enough that this was another example of a sleeper being triggered right by a preset program activated, which caused him to fly directly into a hillside, essentially, with this plane. So to fully create a new person, this is what Rusbacher says: to fully create a new person, give them a history or something that they can cling to when sad or lonely. It takes a team of lab experts, numerous weeks or even months. I don't know the name of the specific chemicals apparently that are utilized in some of the stages of the process itself, because that was compartmentalized apparently and used by the teams. But they can hold a subject comatose for a few days and even months. So a total transfiguration requires a catheter in the neck, urinary and digestive tract to keep their physical balance up to par. Usually at level 5, complete transfiguration will require a cover story like a serious automobile accident or something of similar nature. And he claims that we have never been exposed for any of the level 5 subjects we created. But still, again, the automobile accident cover story sounds exactly like the Manchurian Candidate film. And yeah, his very last statement is just most liable to exposure are level 3 subjects who can remember bits and pieces of their downing after not having been to the shop lab for a couple of years. This is where Randy Weaver is brought in as an example. Level
it's been
3
too long since they've had their ibogaine treatment. But go on.
Yeah, honestly, it seems like that's a possibility, is that there is a shelf life to this programming process, depending on the levels that you were, I guess, you were exposed to. But level 3 operatives, I guess, will always know that they have been worked on or modified because they sign a document that goes into their personnel file. All case officers and field operatives are level 3. So the chemical used for level 4 is not merely hypnotic drug, but also contains proportionate levels of anesthesia. The idea is to keep the subject at the very edge of consciousness during the programming process. And one last set of statements about Operation Open Eyes, basically, is that you have these various projects: Project Falling Rock, Project Behemoth, Project Tiny Rock, Project Mountainside, and all of these projects fall under the auspices of Operation Open Eyes, allegedly. And at one point, he even goes into Project Monarch and claiming, this was one of the most interesting aspects of it all. And he basically is saying that Project Monarch was effectively utilized to provide disinformation to the public, to steer them away from things such as Operation Open Eyes and various levels to Operation Clydesdale and the various other projects and operations that have been named as even being in directly in line with a sort of underground covert pedophile operation that was happening in a very compartmentalized way internally within some of these agency structures and things of that nature. Who knows as to all of that? But that I wanted to mention it only because, essentially he does make some strange statements in regard to Project Monarch and judging the authenticity of serious reporters or investigative journalists by essentially providing them with limited hangouts. And that freaked me out a little bit, honestly, if I'm going to be, just in terms of keeping your head on a swivel, always, just whenever the moment you feel as if you become confidently certain of anything, just make sure you ask a few additional questions before you let that sink in and take effect in your mind's eye moving forward, and apply that in your life. Because I promise you, we it's almost as if we need to question everything we think we know, right? And that's for damn sure in terms of the details of some of these more high impact events and emotional arousing cases like the Wacos of the world and even Oklahoma City bombing. But to question John DeCamp earlier, as the individual caller did, I understand. I definitely understand that so many of these sources glow like the sun, including Gunther Russbacher, right? It's only the attachment to, basically, as we discussed last night, the Danny Castelleros of the world, the martyrs in this line of attempting to provide the public with legitimate, let's just say receipts in terms of addressing the truth, the underlying truth that's being withheld, deliberately by the permanent establishment to keep us in the dark, to fundamentally come to an understanding of what our government has become capable of. And if they are legitimately capable of this level of programming, this is something, it's hard to even conceptualize, man. And again, the way we described the direct context of Paul Wiltshire basically being Danny Castellero 2.0, it begs the question, Why didn't they want Gunter's story out, right? At the very least, we have to be honest with ourselves about that. And so anyway, I feel as if there are 10,000 Manchurian candidates at the very least in the works, ready to be activated at any given moment by this group of programmers whenever they see fit. And Dr. Robert Duncan probably wasn't all that off on that specific data, quote of 10,000. But either way, I'm so sorry that I talk so much, and I love you, brother. I know it took me a lot longer than I intended, but
it's all good.
Again, it's something that's extraordinary, at the very least, right?
100%. With that, yeah, keep your head on a swivel. That's definitely the take to get from all of this. But yeah, let's go ahead and get out of here. Go ahead and go over to the post show, hang out with you fine contributing supporters. With that, Austin, wherever can people find you at? Other than on my show every other week, doing another deep dive from some weird tangent you got into on Already Dead.
Brother. I did Whatever This Is like the night before we did our show last night. I think it was Sunday. We did Whatever This Is. And man, I think Sam had done like 4 shows that day, and Whatever This Is was like his 4th, I think. And my God, I know what that, just as far as like, it feels like you're imploding, in a way. Now, maybe it was just funny because he's like, dude, honestly, thank you for talking. Because at the very end, we go private and we stop the stream. And I'm like, I'm so sorry, guys, because I basically talked about Waco way too much. That wasn't at all the, obviously the goal. But either way, it was funny because Brad's like, dude, stop apologizing. And then, anyway, if I feel like I've been spiraling, and this specifically is just an extraordinary line of evidence that basically reinforces a lot of what I consider to be realistically applicable to the power structure in the current moment. So it's just another extraordinary line of evidence, and so I've been reeling down this rabbit hole, and so I will say, check out Whatever This Is. We just put out episode 60. I believe I published it yesterday. And and then also subscribe to the YouTube, the Rumble, the Underclass podcast, obviously. And I might have to perform some sort of addendum, in the near future for certain episodes that I'm finding much more reinforcing details in regards to those cases. But yeah, what I really wanted to talk about more than anything? Demonic possession, because legitimately I have just a crazy concept to present in regard to that. But either way, there's always another day. And man, definitely support the Patreon if you have the means. It's the best place to support me, and you'll at least at the lowest level, I think $3 a month, you'll be given the paywalled show, which is Whatever This Is. So I appreciate you all, man. I love you, brother.
Appreciate you too. We do have one more super chat that I forgot to go through. $2 from Boomer Sooner saying, I love the tangents, aka the Austin flow. Appreciate the support. I too enjoy the Austin flow, although sometimes it can develop into a full-on devastating waterfall that we have to.
I'm sorry, man.
But that's the trick here. We have that's what this show is, when an immovable object makes whatever the fuck. I just try to do some fucking jujitsu on Austin's autism and create something resembling something intelligible. That's what we try to do together. But with that, for those who want to support what I'm doing, leave a like, share, subscribe, comment, leave a 5-star review on iTunes or Spotify. You can find the show on YouTube, Rumble, all the major audio podcasters, and Twitter as well. On Twitter, that's at TowerGangJose. Everywhere else, that's the No Way Jose podcast. If you want to support the show the best way you can do that with money over at patreon.com/NoWayJose2020. At the low level of $2, I give you guys a whole host of perks. I try to give you guys 1 to 2 episodes per week. I don't try, I actually do. And I also give you guys keep 3 to 4 behind the paywall any given time. Also give you guys access to the ad-free RSS feed, give you guys access to Telegram, the pre-show, post-show, and video calls on this show right here, Already Dead, which goes out on Tuesdays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. Also give a big shout out to the highest level on my Patreon, which is my sponsors. It's a big thank you for their support on my previous Ghost and Tower Gang, at Leonard Toad, also at Brigade D's, at ZWRCK, at _Invincible, Tim Tuttle, at John Cleeble, big fan of the show, Torment, at Wayne Titus, Wonder Card for Kids, No Free Lunch, Jark, Mark Vestibule, Jacob Wintergrad, Biblical Anarchy Podcast, and John Black, that beautiful bastard. And with that, guys, we will see you on the next one. Love you all. Bye-bye. See the patrons in the post show.